Hello, everyone. I am here with Ido. He's the CEO of BetterSeeds, which is a company I've been really excited to hear about. Now, Ido, just tell me about yourself a little bit. Tell me about the company. When did it start? Yeah.
So, hi, Shaul, and thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm Ido Margalit. I'm an agronomist by my occupation. I founded BetterSeeds 5 years ago, and I am the CEO. I'm the co-founder, by the way. Prior to working at and founding BetterSeeds, I worked at Syngenta. Syngenta is the largest agri-tech company in the world, and I worked at their seeds division. So I am a seeds guy.
Mhm.
And during my work at Syngenta, I've been acquainted to a really breakthrough new technology called CRISPR technology. And after I left Syngenta, together with the co-founder, Dr. Tal Sherman, who also worked at Syngenta, being a researcher, we already understood way back then, over 5 years ago, that the future of agriculture, in order to feed the world with all the food security issues that we're now facing, it has to be centered around genetics. And with this really new technology called CRISPR, we're now capable of developing good and better genetics that will enable agriculture to overcome all the potential hurdles. So over 5 years ago, we founded the company. And since then, we've been concentrating on applying CRISPR technology and making crops much better.
Wow. Okay. First of all, that's really interesting stuff. Now, how long did you work at that company for, Syngenta?
At Syngenta, I worked for 6 years.
6 years. And then you and the co-founder both left together to start your own company.
Exactly. Well, for full disclosure, Syngenta was acquired by the Chinese, the biggest Chinese acquisition outside of China. And so we knew beforehand that very soon they're going to do a lot of downsizing as a result of this acquisition. So let's just say it was not our choice, but we already had a plan, a B plan afterwards.
Wow. Now, tell me a little bit, give me a little more background before then. So you went to school to study seeds. You said, I forgot the word. What's the word you are?
An agronomist.
Agronomist. Tell me about that. What is that like?
So in Israel, by the way, the only school that, at least at my time, provided this sort of a certificate was the Hebrew University, the Faculty of Agriculture. And they teach you over there, there's a few disciplines that are involved around agriculture. Some of them are for seeds production, some of them are for crop protection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was the main, at my time, the only agriculture faculty. It is considered still Israel's top leading agriculture faculty, and I believe one of the leading agriculture faculties in the world.
Oh.
By the way, our top advisor, Professor Chaim Rabinovich, who was the rector of the Faculty of Agriculture, he's the guy who developed the cherry tomato. I assume I don't have to tell you what the cherry tomato is.
No.
And he's the forefather of modern breeding. He's the guy who developed the first modern trait, what's called shelf life. It's a trait that enabled us to consume vegetables and fruits not in the season by providing an extended shelf life. So he's the guy who developed it over 40 years ago as a researcher in the Faculty of Agriculture. And by the way, he is our chief breeding advisor since BetterSeeds' inception 5 years ago.
Really?
Yes.
Wait, so how old is he? He must be pretty old because this was developed.
He's not a young guy. He's a healthy, vibrant guy, but he's not young.
That's amazing. Okay, so you guys decided to start BetterSeeds 5 years ago. Just tell me about that process. Where do you go from there? So you're like, we know what we're doing with seeds. We want to create a better seed for the world that, we're going to talk about that soon. Just tell me about the process of starting the company, and from 5 years ago till now, what has happened in those 5 years?
Actually, it's a very interesting story because over 5 years ago, when we left Syngenta, we had in our vision, let's make soybean betters, let's make tomato betters, and using this new CRISPR technology, which if you don't know what it is, I'll be more than happy to elaborate further on. But we went to investors and we said, we want to make better plant genetics. And the average Israeli investor was like, agriculture, genetics, it's not for us. And I said, well, no, but wait, it's this CRISPR technology. And they're, what? CRISPR, what? That was before CRISPR technology got the Chemistry Nobel Prize Award in 2020. So over 5 years ago, it was, what's this strange word? Nobody really knew what CRISPR was. So no, not for us. No, thank you. So then we started looking where there are deep pockets and money available. And that's where we became acquainted with the cannabis industry. And being seeds persons, and we immediately identified major gaps that existed in the hemp and the cannabis industry. And we came up with, I would say, a plan whereby we apply what we dreamt about for soybean and tomatoes on hemp and cannabis. So we did get the funding, we did create the company, we did accumulate all the available know-how and resources. And 3 years after, that's over 2 years ago, we understood that we have reached critical mass, or the critical mass for the company. And now it's time to take out from the drawer the original plan and to make BetterSeeds happen and apply all that we have, all the resources, all the know-how back in soybean, tomatoes, etc., in order to feed the world.
Wow. I love that. I love that story because you used what you needed to do in order to get where you are now, because to get to your goal. It didn't matter how you got there. You said this is where the funding is. This is what I'm going to do, and now you're on track to do what you want.
Exactly. You know, if we would have gotten the funding 5 years ago, we could have had our products a long time ago on the market, and now lo and behold, our vision, it was a negative vision of all the problems that we'll be facing agriculture, have realized. I mean, and still, by the way, people still avoid the major issue of food security. People are not understanding that the climate change and food security are alive and kicking right now. If you haven't understood that yet, no, not you. Yeah, if anyone here is like climate change, you know, it's a different political issue, but at least food security. If anyone is lying to themselves that this is not the situation, no, it is. It's happening. And we need to solve it. And there's a different methods of solving it. Yeah, you could do technology. There's a lot of people that believe only in technology, you know, drones, robots, sensors, that will save agriculture. No. You know, that's just an interim solution, because all those solutions are based on genetics. Now, if your tree cannot grow at, I don't know Fahrenheit, I only know Celsius. So yeah, I apologize.
No problem.
No, but let's say in Celsius, if your tree cannot bear fruits over 30 degrees Celsius, it doesn't matter how many drones, sensors, and robots you have, there won't be any fruits to pick. So it doesn't really matter the technology. The only way to solve the climate change issues that affect food security, genetics. That's the only long-term solution.
Now, what you envisioned 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what you guys envisioned, what was the actual? Tell me about the food security issues that you envisioned that are happening now. What did you see was going to happen, and what is happening, and what do you see happening in the future? Because which is the reason for creating BetterSeeds.
Yeah, so we are focused on two major issues that are very relevant today, and we see that already now acutely, and that is that agriculture is not profitable. So anywhere that the labor is very expensive and a lot of agriculture is based on a lot of on much labor, it's being phased out. In Israel today, where labor is very expensive, agriculture is a disappearing discipline. There's very little growers in Israel. The same is happening in Europe, the same is happening in the United States. So a lot of the crops that are being grown today are being handpicked. Handpicking is labor. Labor equals a lot of money. A lot of money means not profitable. So a lot of the crops have to be changed from being handpicked to mechanized harvesting. So this was one of our most fundamental pillars that we already identified and concentrated on 5 years ago. Let's move crops that are being handpicked, change their architecture, and make them mechanized harvest ready. The second thing, of course, is climate change. We already saw that the temperature is increasing. A lot of the crops today are not bringing the same yield that they did, if they bring any yield at all, because of the rise of the temperature. It doesn't have to rise by 10 degrees Celsius again. It's enough that they rise by 1 or 1.5 degrees Celsius and you get zero yield or significantly no yield. Just 2-3 weeks ago, there was a huge TV show in Israel that talked about that 1.5 degrees Celsius. I don't know how much in Fahrenheit, but it's not that much in Celsius. Rise in heat in Israel decimated the apple industry in North Israel. We're talking about an 8-decade-long industry, decimated it in 2-3 years. And Israel is well known for its wine and vineyards. It reduced the yield of the grapevines by 70 to 80%, just 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the two issues are labor. If it requires a lot of labor, it's not profitable. It's not economical to sustain agriculture in the country where it's not profitable. And the second thing is, if the climate does not fit growing the crops, you just cannot grow them. So those were the two major things that we focused on and developing the solutions for those two major problems.
And what about pesticides? What about certain type of like bugs that are destroying crops? Is that a major issue that you're thinking of, or that's something that just happens?
Yes, but it's not a generic problem because South America might have their own pests. Africa might have their own other pests. North America has its own pests. So we were looking for, I would call it a common chassis,
Correct.
a global common chassis that is the major. For most of the pests, with all due respect, there's excellent pesticides. Working at Syngenta, I can tell you they have excellent pesticides. Spray the pesticide, you kill the pests, problem solved. Temperature, I cannot change the temperature outside. Making it, how do I make it that I can mechanize harvest? I cannot do magic. I have to change something genetically.
Now, okay, so those are the two issues. What does Better Seed come to solve? Like, what's the solution with BetterSeeds? Like, what is it?
So first of all, we recognize a major problem that exists in applying CRISPR technology. As I said, a genetic enhancement of the crops is the needed solution in order for us to handle the costs of harvesting and the climate change. The tool that will enable that is CRISPR technology. But though, by the way, we didn't develop CRISPR technology. It was developed by MIT, Harvard, and Berkeley University. And Corteva has an exclusive license from Berkeley University for agriculture application. So it's not an open technology. You have to get a license for that. CRISPR, once it's in the plant cell itself, it does its job very well. The challenge is, how do I apply CRISPR to all the different kind of crops? The fact that I know how to apply it in one specific crop, let's say soybean, and the next day I want to apply it, let's say on pepper plant, or let's say on wheat or any other crop, it will not necessarily work. I might have to invest months, years, if at all, to make CRISPR work on different crops. So the biggest gap is, how do I deliver CRISPR broadly to all crops? And this is something that we encountered in cannabis. Cannabis was an extremely difficult crop to apply CRISPR on. I can tell you that we recruited Dr. Shira Korem, our VP of R&D. She did her postdoctorate in Israel's leading plant science institute. It's called Vulcani Institute. And she did it on gene editing, CRISPRing tomatoes. And when we recruited her, she said, 3, 4, 5 months, I will gene edit cannabis. 3, 4, 5 months passed like that. 1 year passed like that. 2 years, nothing almost worked, until we understood that we had to think outside the box and not to force CRISPR to work in cannabis, but to find a delivery technology that will take it very easily into the cannabis cells. And then we understood, wow, we have here a generic solution that is agnostic to the type of the crop. So I can now make it work in pepper, I can now make it work in cannabis, I can now apply it on virtually almost any crop. And so that's the solution that we're bringing. We are actually, we call it boosting CRISPR technology. We're actually enabling the use and application of CRISPR technology in agriculture. And as I said, CRISPR will solve all the food security issues. So we're providing a tool that is completely missing in agriculture for the use of CRISPR technology. That's number one thing that we've been doing. The other thing is we decided to focus on a few products that we're developing. I would say that one of our major ones, apart from cannabis and hemp are very important, but they do not feed the world. So we looked at what is the biggest gap that exists today in the food industry, and soybean being the number one plant-based protein that is used in order to develop food products. It's a crop that is going to suffer heavily due to climate change. It's a crop that needs temperate climate, a lot of water, and a lot of fertilizers. All the things that climate change is going to apply. Temperature is rising, water is going to be very scarce. It's already quite scarce, and the fertilizers are becoming scarce again. It's not an endless, abundant product we have. It's going to finish very soon. So a lot of the companies what are they doing? They're saying, okay, we're going to make soybean better for climate change. We're going to look for genes that may make them more resilient or heat tolerant, make them consume less water, make them need less fertilizers. But we just looked left to soybean at its cousin, and we saw, wow, there's a cousin. It's called cowpea or black-eyed peas. And it has almost the same amount of protein that soybean has, but it's drought resistant, it's heat resistant, and it almost needs no fertilizers. But it was overlooked because there was soybean. There was always soybean. Who needs cowpea? So cowpea has not been domesticated like soybean for mass scale production, and it's grown in third world countries, and it undergoes a hand picking, manual labor hand picking. So it's not economical. So what we are doing using CRISPR technology is domesticating cowpea for mass scale production and mechanized harvesting. What took 80 years to do in soybean, we are doing in 2 years using CRISPR. So we are bringing an alternative. I don't have to reinvent the wheel and make cowpea heat resistant and drought resistant and need less fertilizer. It's already inherently there. I'm just changing its architecture and making it a fitting for mechanized harvesting. And then it will be economical to grow it in Brazil, in Argentina, in the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That is very interesting. So CRISPR can be used to make a crop better to be harvested by machines. That's what you're saying, right?
CRISPR can be used to virtually express any needed trait as long as that gene already exists in the plant. We're not introducing a foreign gene.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let me go one step behind. What does modern breeding, conventional breeding, done till now? They screened plants and they looked for a unique phenotype, something interesting that appears in the plant. Where does this unique phenotype come from? It comes from a natural mutation that happened. It happens, let's say, 1 in a billion. 1 in a billion occurrences, there's a unique mutation in the plant that makes a very special and unique trait. What the breeders do, they look for those sort of mutations, and then they apply those mutations in the commercial products that they have. But as I told you, it's 1 in a billion. So the chances for you to get the mutated gene in order for you to get the trait that you want is almost nil. Gotcha. What the CRISPR does is a targeted mutation in the gene. So if you know what the gap is, and you know what the trait is, and you know which gene that exists in the plant, a bit mutating it, you get a positive trait, CRISPR technology will do that. Up to now, you had to rely on the grace of God for that to happen. Now, using CRISPR technology, you can do it by yourself.
It's almost like a miracle. That's amazing.
It is.
Wow.
That's because CRISPR is heralded as, I would say, the most important finding in life science in the 21st century. By the way, it's not just being applied in agriculture. CRISPR is applied in clinical.
Right.
I just saw yesterday that Gaucher, it's approved by the FDA for a very special, very unique genetic disease in humans.
Wow.
There was no solution for it. Now, CRISPR, voila.
It's amazing. Wow. Okay. So first of all, tell me about the company itself, right? BetterSeeds. How many employees do you have? How does it even work? Like, tell me about that.
We have 3 sites which we operate on. We have our central site that is in Israel, our R&D and the corporate offices, and also our main production site is here in Israel. Yeah. We also have a hemp seeds production facility in San Diego, which is fully owned by us. We also have licensed an LP medical cannabis seeds facility in Montreal, in Canada. So overall, we have close to 40 employees that are around those 3 different sites.
Gotcha.
But the main R&D is not doing. All R&D is done in Israel. And most of the 40 employees that are, most of them are, of course, here in Israel. There are R&D guys, and most of them are plant geneticists. Yeah. So we are mostly plant biotech company, because CRISPR is biotech. And since we are also applying those unique traits, those biotech traits in the varieties and producing the seeds, we are also a seeds production company. So we are both a biotech and a seeds company.
Very interesting. Now, how do you market yourself to companies? Like, do companies know that you exist? Do they come over to you and say, we need your help, growing? Or like, how does people know that you guys, this is amazing technology? And I feel like every person who grows should want to hear what you can do for their crops. How do you work with that?
So first of all, we're not a service company. So we're a standalone company. So it is not in my business to offer services to whomever will have some sort of a need or an idea for me to solve a specific need that they have. But since we're identified as a leading company in applying CRISPR technology in agriculture, we are approached regularly by potential partners asking us to help them solve problems and develop jointly or only for payment, solutions. And we do it, by the way, selectively. Only if there's a very unique synergy, then we go along with that. And by the way, we've been approached about 1.5 years ago by Merck. Merck is, one of the top 3 pharmaceutical companies in the world.
Right.
And they have their own unique CRISPR patent portfolio, considered one of the biggest in the world, which they use for clinical applications. Right. And since Merck doesn't have an agricultural branch, they approached us and asked us if we, after they said they screened the different CRISPR companies in the world, and they selected us, and they asked us if we can check if their CRISPR that they designed for clinical applications will work also in plants. So we do now have a unique joint venture collaboration with Merck to check if their CRISPR technology works also in plants. And of course, we have a license to use their technology in plants, making us the only plant company in the world to have access to Merck's technology for plants. So this is just shows you an example that we are already recognized as a leading CRISPR company in the world.
That is amazing. Wow. That is really, now, what do you see what do you see the future now in regards to just food in general? You know the problems. The solutions seem like the solution here, but to get that out to the world, to have everyone, I don't know how mainstream it could be, or we want it to be, but it's going to be hard. What do you see happening down the road in regards to food?
So genetics is not a swipe solution. Correct. It's not a technology you can develop, put a bunch of engineers and make a better product in 6 months and make a much better product and launch it after 1 year or 1.5 years. Correct. Genetics takes a long time. CRISPR has reduced it considerably. It increased the likelihood of success and reduced the time considerably, but it will still take a few years. But the problem, the biggest challenge is that the investment in general, in genetics, in plant genetics, all over the world has reduced considerably. Even in Israel, it is a challenge of finding breeders, of finding plant geneticists. We have a unique project for trees. It took us 2 years almost to launch this project because we couldn't find in Israel a tree genetic researcher. Wow. So I would say the biggest challenge is to invest in plant genetics and invest in the education in the universities in plant genetics and breeding. If in Israel, which is considered a leading place in the world for agriculture and plant genetics, we are suffering this huge problem, I am sure that it happens all over the world, maybe even more acutely. So the governments need to invest in genetics. They need to invest in the companies and enable them adopt CRISPR. Also, there's a regulation issue which is being solved slowly because the European Union has classified CRISPR technology as GMO, genetically modified organism, even though it is not. It's deregulated in Israel, it's deregulated in most of the countries in the world, even countries that are anti-GMO, like Japan and Israel, they're anti-GMO, just like the European Union, but they declassified CRISPR. But European Union, they decided, mainly due to a political decision, to classify the GMO. Then companies around the world, we're not touching CRISPR. We're not touching CRISPR. We do not want to devoid ourselves from this potential market. So you have to handle the regulatory issues relating CRISPR technology. You have to enable funding because, as you understood, CRISPR is a biotech. It's not just enough to bring a breeder in a greenhouse, problem solved, like conventional breeding happens today. It requires scientists, laboratories, machinery. It's a lot of investment if the governments would enable that. And lastly, invest in the education, in the academy. Those three things have to happen. Otherwise, our future is very glum.
Wow.
By the way, I always like to talk, have you seen the movie Interstellar?
I believe I have.
You know, Matthew McConaughey? It's a futuristic movie that talks about, let's say, 50 years from now, the planet is dying.
Yeah.
Why is that? In the opening shot, I think you see the drones and robots. You see that there's a combine, a fully robot, automated combine harvesting. You see a drone running around and imaging everything. But the plant is dying. Why is that? Because there's a fungus, a new fungus, and all the crops around the world cannot handle the fungus. And it doesn't matter how many robots and how many drones and how many sensors you have, the crops are dying because of the fungus, because there's no genetic resistance. So even this futuristic movie, by the way, excellent movie. I recommend it highly to anyone to see it. Excellent movie. It just answers everything. Without plant genetics, with all the climate change, food security is going to be much worse.
We all see it happening. We see also very acutely in the past year or two or few, there's water shortages. The weather is changing, and it doesn't look good for crops at all. The fact that you're saying that the education level is very low for these type of jobs, that's not gonna there has to be a push to teach people so they can work on it. Wow, very, very interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to process everything, but this is like CRISPR. First of all, people don't I'm having you explain CRISPR because people don't really know what CRISPR even does. They don't know what they hear the word, they don't know really what it is. So, but you explained it very well. We just understand, like what CRISPR does. It can, I don't even still don't understand it fully, but I guess you can choose specific, specific, I guess DNA, but it's not really DNA for a plant.
Genes in the DNA, you target them and you mutate them, and by mutating them, you create a positive trait.
Exactly, so that's what it is. Wow.
But instead of random mutations that happen outside, you make a selective, precise mutation.
That's amazing. Wow. I'm trying to think. So what do you see BetterSeeds doing, let's say in the future, right? The company's 5 years old. You're working on a lot of stuff right now. What do you see you guys 5-10 years down the road? You talked about the peas, right? Do you see yourself working on other types of crops? Are you going to focus on one? Are you going to try to use your technology in different regions, different countries, every continent? What's your vision?
We are a global company, and the solutions that we're developing are relevant to all the different regions in the world. As I indicated, we are working today because we are still a young company with limited resources. We cannot develop every possible solution. Today, we're focused on 7 types of solution. And as we grow and as we generate revenues, we'll probably apply our technology on many other products as well. We're already, by the way, patenting them. What I didn't indicate is that today there's some sort, you can call it an arms race, the patent arms race between the different CRISPR companies. Because if you understood, if you identified the needed trait and the gene, if you patent that gene by gene editing it, then you prevent others from accessing the same gene to develop the same trait, giving you a monopoly over that same trait. Now, if it's an acute and much needed trait on a very important crop, then you master of the world. So today there's an arms race. We have over 52 patent applications, by the way, and for such a young company, it's a lot. And if you look at the different CRISPR companies that exist around, I would say there's about a dozen of them. Some of them even have I saw them claiming 400 different patent applications. So there's an arms race. And whomever today, I would say, is sleeping on their legs and saying, in 5 years, after I see all the errors that the BetterSeeds will do, let's say if I'm a multinational large company, then I will let BetterSeeds do all the errors, and then I will do exactly what they do. Is sorry, I mean, I can do all the errors, but I still own the patent to that gene. You still have to access me or the competitors for that matter. So the patents are also very, very important in this field. And in regard to the products, so we're doing cowpeas, bringing plant-based protein as a legume. We're also in another legume, it's peanuts. Also, peanuts have a lot of problems. We're talking about reducing the allergens. You know, there's a lot of problems in regard to allergens. There's a lot of problem in shelf life for peanuts, and also a lot of problems the quality and loss of yield in peanuts. So we're applying also our capabilities in order to make them more nutritional, no allergens, and making them, of course, higher quality and better yield and extended shelf life. That's another solution that we are doing. It's all, by the way, you know, peanuts is also good for oil. And one of the most, I would say, major, I don't know how much time we have, one of the most ambitious projects is turning orchards or perennial crops or multi-seasonal crops, if you will, into seasonal crops.
Wow.
Half of the world agriculture is based on orchards, you know, fruit, apples, oranges, etc. So those are trees that you plant them, you wait 5-6 years until they get to maturity. The grower invests a lot of money, gets nothing in return. And then afterwards, he relies on his ROI for decades of harvesting the fruits to return the investment. Now, here's the problem. There's two issues. Climate change. What if I planted an orange tree that cannot handle a 1-degree rise in temperature, like happened with apples in the north? The grower is screwed. He can invest 5-6 years, and in 5-6 years, the temperature will rise. He'll get nothing. Another thing is I did pick the correct variety that will handle climate change, but the consumer preferences are changing now every 2-3 years. If people used to consume the same orange for 20-30 years, now after 3-4 years, you know, no, I don't want that type of variety of orange. I want that type. You're screwed. And not only that, most of the growers, they don't own the land, they lease the land. So it's good to lease it for one season. How do you lease the land for 40 years? So many of the growers, they don't want to handle orchards. They want to do seasonal crops. And by the way, I didn't mention manual harvesting, you know, apples and oranges.
You got to pick them.
So you're not going to make any money. So even if I do everything correct, and then I'm going to pay so much money for somebody to harvest the fruits, I'm going to lose it anyway. Who wants that? So what has to be done is changing those crops from multi-seasonal to one season, meaning that instead of having an apple orchard that will take you 5 to 6 years to reach maturity and harvesting it for 30 years, and instead of having, let's say, 50 trees in that acre, you're going to have 1,000 small trees in that same plot of land. You're going to have it by 1 year a yield. You're not going to have 100 pounds per tree. You're going to have 3 pounds per tree, meaning still in the same acre, you're going to get the same yield that you would have gotten in 6 years. You're going to get them in 1 year. And since it's small plant, the combine is going to come and it's going to mechanically harvest them. And that's the end point of growing. And then you have this clear plot of land. And then you can make a decision. Temperature is rising. This variety is not good. Consumer preferences is changing. I'm not going to do that. Or in general, who wants to do apples? I want to do soybean. I want to do tomatoes in the same plot. So it's an amazing. And we began that 2 years ago, and people told us this is science fiction. And in the past 8-9 months, we've seen a lot of science groups around the world speaking about saving agriculture. Half of it, perennial crops. We must switch it to seasonal from multi-seasonal. This is our most ambitious.
Wow. So that's, you guys are giving people the options of what to grow, when to grow, how to grow it. That's what I'm seeing here. In everything.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's the thing that will enable us to handle climate change and food security. This type of versatility.
Wow. Okay, Ido, we're almost out of time, but I just want to say I want to speak to you for hours about this. This is our future. So it's not just something we can disregard. It's our future. But what you guys are doing is so unique, so amazing, and it's very exciting. Also, I know you guys are working very hard, and you're worried about the crops. But it's very exciting. The technology is very exciting, and it's just amazing to see what's going on. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for explaining everything. And I would love to, hopefully we'll speak to you guys again, hear what BetterSeeds is doing in the future. because it's only going to grow larger and larger.
Thank you for having me. And if you're in Israel, you're more than welcome to visit us.
I would love to. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaul.